Hi friends, welcome back to Parent Story Hour. I thought I'd get a little dressed up today because the story I have for you is from a collection called Grandpa Spanielson's Chickenpox Stories, and the book is called A Snout for Chocolate. Unfortunately, I forgot that I have a meeting tonight, so I'm really hoping that these chickenpox come off of my face easily. I really don't want to explain that. Okay, so the story is kind of long, so I'm going to just fill you in on the beginning part. Grandma and Grandpa Dog, here they are watching their grandson dog, or their grand pup, sorry, and he has the chicken pox. And the grandfather says, I want to tell him a story. And the grandmother said, you promised you'd wash the windows first. Go wash the windows. So the grandpa thinks he's really clever, and he climbs a ladder to go outside and wash the windows, but climbs into the grandson's room. And he says, I'm going to tell you a story. So that's where it starts with our story, A Snout for Chocolate. And it is just as bizarre as it sounds. Once upon a time in the olden days, when Grandma washed her own windows, I was the fire chief. We were sitting around the firehouse when the phone rang. A voice said, Help me, help me. Who is this? I asked. Miss Iggyman, said the voice. Icky man, I said. You're an icky man? No, shouted the voice. Doc Storkmeyer listened. Who is this? He said. Miss Iggyman, I uck. Piggerman, said Doc. It's Mrs. Piggerman, and she's uck. Hurry, cried Mrs. Piggerman. So she has called the fire department. Mrs. Piggerman is stuck somewhere. I sounded the alarm. Sirens wailed. Red lights blinked. 2 fire engines and an ambulance roared to the Piggerman's place. Strangely, when we got there, we didn't see any smoke. I sent the boys around back to check the house. Doc and I went up to the front door. It was open. We went in. So they got to the house, and there was really no signs of anything being wrong. There was a pile of candy wrappers on a little table. Lunch, I said. Shh, said Doc. Listen. Someone was calling softly. It sounded like, help me, help me. It was coming from the kitchen. And the chief here says, uh-oh, someone is off her diet. We looked. Mrs. Piggerman was in the refrigerator. At least part of her was in the refrigerator. The front half was in the refrigerator. The big half was still in the kitchen. Now I really want you to take this picture all in here. Okay, so here's her situation. Her head, or her snout, I should say, is somehow stuck in the freezer. I'm not sure how she called the fire department, honestly. I'm not sure that I would call the fire department if I were eating something out of my freezer and my head got stuck in it. I think I'd probably just die that way. It would be too embarrassing. Mrs. Piggerman's head was in the freezer. Her snout was stuck to a frozen box of chocolates. Doc looked at me. I looked at Doc. She's stuck, I said. How are we going to get her out? Hammer, said Doc. Help, said Mrs. Piggerman. Blowtorch, I said. Help, help, said Mrs. Piggerman. Doc found a hair dryer, which between a hammer and a blowtorch, I mean, they're the fire department. That was their first thought, to use a hammer on this pig. I blew hot air across Mrs. Piggerman's nose. The ice started to melt. Get ready, I yelled. She's coming loose. The whole thing. If the fire department had to yell, she's coming loose. About me? No, I just couldn't. I turned up the heat. Help, help, cried Mrs. Piggerman. So here she is. I mean, and at this point, our heart kind of goes out to her. Her head is stuck in a freezer. You know, I was kind of on her team at this point, but wait till you see what happens. Timber, someone yelled. Move her out, Doc shouted. It would have been easier to move the refrigerator. is what I never want a fireman to say about me. Thank goodness I'm working out. It took all of us to get her out of the house and down the steps. After a few minutes in the sun, the box of chocolates slid off her nose. I passed the chocolate around. Okay. So it was stuck on her snout, if you will. And as it slid and melted off, the fireman passed it around for people to take a piece if they wanted it. That is the first disturbing thing. Well, not the first, but that's pretty disturbing. Then what happens next is even worse. Mrs. Piggerman jumped up and snatched the box away. Mine, she yelled. She stomped into her house and slammed the door. Okay, so she called the fire department for help. They pried her out of her freezer. And then when they passed around the chocolate that was embedded in her snout, she got upset about it? I don't think she has the right to really be upset about that. Wow, said Barney. I don't know why she was so mad, said Grandpa. Doc Storkmeyer ate all the creams. All I got were those chewy things that stick to your teeth. You'd think she'd be more grateful, said Barney. That's what I was saying. You'd think so, said Grandpa. How are the itches? So here's the grandpa talking to his grandpup. Getting better, said Barney. It's my anti-itch story, said Grandpa. Did I ever tell you about the time Doc Storkmeyer and I got lost in the jungle? No, said Barney. Yep, said Grandpa. Doc Storkmeyer got his head shrunk by cannibals. Shrunk? Asked Barney. Shrunk, said Grandpa. Shrunk to the size of a cranberry. Wow, said Barney. Tell me. Well, once upon a time, suddenly the door opened. Grandpa ducked down. Barney grabbed a comic book. Grandma came in and sat by the window. I made some cocoa, she said. This will make you feel better. Thank you, said Barney. Grandma smiled. I made one for myself, too, she said. Barney looked at the tray. There was a third cup on it. Who's that one for, he asked. Grandma picked up the cup and held it out the window. Guess who? So I guess that's a sign of a good marriage right there. She knows that she asked him to clean the windows and that he was hanging out telling his grandson a story instead. Cute book. Very weird story in the middle. And I'm not sure what the moral was of that story. Don't stick your head in your freezer. Be grateful if someone has taken the time to use a hairdryer and free you from a situation like that. Not sure. You can draw your own conclusions. So that was A Snout for Chocolate, Grandpa Spanielson's Chicken Pox Stories, story number 2. I hope everyone is staying sane and healthy, and we will see you tomorrow for Parent Story Hour.